Okay, I think it's time for us to start. We're three minutes in. So I think first of all, I'd really just like to welcome everyone today to our webinar, our Zoom webinar. And we are here today to launch a very exciting project that I, together with my colleagues, have been dreaming about for quite a long time. And we never really had the opportunity to make it happen. And then for some reason this year, I don't know, everything just worked out well, and the opportunity lent itself to us. And we are now here with the launch of this very exciting movement that we're kicking off tomorrow on World Bee Day. But I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on in more detail. I think, first of all, I would like to run you through the panelists for today. So to introduce myself, I'm Shani. I work for Candide, the global gardening app in South Africa. I'm responsible for our South African market. So I'm the market lead in South Africa. On the panel today with me, I have Gundula Deutschlander, who is a master gardener at Babylonstoren. And I have Paula Cornell, who is a beekeeper at the Newt in the United Kingdom, and an absolute bee enthusiast. So very excited to have the two of them with us today. And I will introduce them later and we'll get them talking to you. I think if we can quickly run through the agenda for today. So first off, I'm just going to start with a bit of a Zoom overview so that we can just make sure every one of us understand Zoom and know where all the functionalities are that we'll be using. And then I'll explain a little bit more about Candide as a gardening app and what we do and what the heart is of our app. We'll go into Pollination SA. Then Paula will talk a bit about bees with us, and Gundula will discuss a bit more about bee-friendly plants. And then if time permits at the end, being respectful of everyone's time, if time permits, we will then open the discussion for questions. So quickly to touch base on Zoom. So first and foremost, a lot of people can't attend today's session, so we have decided to record the session just so that everyone's aware of it, to share for people who won't be able to attend today. Then as this is a webinar, what is important to know about a webinar different to a Zoom meeting is only the panelists are in view. So none of the attendees in this call will be able to turn on their cameras. And then what you all will be able to do is you can unmute yourselves, but we do ask that you please stay muted for the duration of the call, just so that everyone can hear the discussion clearly when we start talking to our panelists and ask questions. In the middle, so if you hover towards the bottom of your screen, you'll see a menu bar opening up. Towards the left is the mute button I just explained, where you can mute and unmute. And then in the middle, you'll see two buttons. The one is Q&A, questions and answers, and then the other one is chat. For this call, we are going to do the following. In the Q&A section, we're going to open that up for questions pertaining to our discussion about bees and plants today. So any questions you might have, you can throw into the question and answers tab. And if you already notice a question in there that is similar to a question you might ask, you'll see there's a little thumbs up symbol. And you can press that thumbs up symbol, and that'll indicate to us that, you know, if there's 6 thumbs ups, it basically says to us that 6 people are interested in the same question. So it's very easy for us then visually to see which questions quickly jump to the top. And then the other button, the chat button, we're going to use that in this call today for any technical audio visual difficulties people might have, or as we've seen already, people just, you know, making beautiful, friendly comments and gestures and welcoming others. Yeah, so really just that is just an informal chat between all of us, and just to recognize we see all of you and we know you're there and we're here to help you. So that'll all happen in the chat. But if we can please keep the plant and bee questions in the chat separate. So try and keep all your questions related to plants and bees in the question and answers one. Okay, that is Zoom. Now I'm going to quickly talk to you about Candide. So some of you might not know, or a lot of you might not know, we are a community-based gardening app. And myself and Tessa, she sits next to me. I'm going to ask her to jump into the camera quickly here so that you can all see her. We are the team in South Africa, and she's my absolute right hand that really helps me achieve everything that we do. And without her, yeah, we wouldn't be able to, for instance, do this today. So yeah, really happy to have her on my team in South Africa, and we are the team. There's no more Candide members in South Africa. The rest of our team, however, quite a large team, sits in Bristol in the United Kingdom. And it's a team that's comprised of about 55 engineers, content writers, growth marketers, and we all work together on building this community-based gardening app and ensuring that it's really the best product for our community that are on the app. We started in 2017, and at the moment we have around about 300,000 plant and garden enthusiasts on Candide, and South Africa is about 20% of our market. And I think what is important for me to mention, though, is as a community-based gardening app, our aim is really to encourage people to reconnect with their gardens and share this joy that they are experiencing in their gardens every day. Whether it's a balcony garden with a few terracotta pots, or whether you've got a very large garden with beautiful green grass, you can be a newbie, you can be experienced. Candide is really a place for anyone and everyone to come and connect with us about plants and gardening. And some of you might wonder where our name comes from, and I would just like to briefly touch on that. So our name draws inspiration from Voltaire's novel of the same name, and we as Candide follow in his lasting profound reflection, which is the very last line in his book that says, "In the end, we must cultivate a garden." And I'm sure many of the gardeners that might be on the call with us today can relate with this in the fact that when we are outside, when we are in our outdoor spaces, we are in such a positive environment where we forget about life and everything that worries us, and we're really just present with our plants, our hands in the soil, and really observing everything that we see and hear and feel around us. And that is for us very important as Candide, is to continue sharing that joy that people experience with plants and with gardening. And as I mentioned, as a garden is so important to us, and it's such, you know, an integral part of our app and our community. That's also the place where this movement, Pollination SA, started. We saw it as an opportunity to get people back into their gardens, and when we get them back into their gardens, to really remind them and make them more aware of bees and how important they are as pollinators to us. So next time, what we want to say is, when you plant your indigenous or your water-wise garden, think about bees and how can you make that water-wise garden or that indigenous garden that you have a more bee-friendly garden. So to end it off, Pollination SA is truly for us a movement where we really just want to encourage South Africans to grow bee-friendly plants and to become more aware of bees in their gardens and in their environments. And to touch just a little bit on the why, I think I've already mentioned a few of this. I think bees, as we mentioned, are such an integral part of gardens, and they're important to us. Then for sustainability, I mean, bees, we all know how important bees are, and just how important they are when it comes to pollination and pollinating plants and food crops that we eat on a daily basis. And then last but not least, just for awareness, to really make people more aware of bees and to make sure that, that all of us can step back and just look at our environment. What are we doing on a daily basis in our houses, in our gardens, and how can we perhaps change a habit or two to ensure that we are improving our environments and making them a better and more bee-friendly place. And last but not least, I think the very most important thing is, a lot of you might ask, how can you get involved? So first of all, get planting. I think the more plants we can plant, and the more we can encourage people to plant bee-friendly plants, the more food we can generate for bees, which is so important for them. Second on the list is, please register yourself as a pollinator on Candide. It's very easy to do. I'm going to go into a bit of detail about it now. But by registering as a pollinator, you become part of our movement, and we also track this nationally on a map of South Africa. And then third but not least on the list, please help spread the word. Create that buzz about Pollination SA in South Africa and help us reach our 100,000 pollinator mark by the end of, by 20 May 20 is our end date. So we'll run the campaign for entire 10 months. So please, spread the word, tell people about Pollination SA, and tell them about Candide and how to download it and what they need to do to become a pollinator. So to quickly just touch on the steps of how to become a pollinator, it's very easy. For those of you who are not already part of our wonderful community on Candide, please go and download Candide. It's free and it's available on the Google Play Store and the iOS Store. And then once you've downloaded it, please create an account for yourself. So if you go onto Candide, you'll see Shani. I'm there with my name in Candide and my profile's there with all my posts I've made. So yeah, go and create an account for yourself. And then we'd like you to make a post. And in this post, we would like you to please take a picture of a bee-friendly plant. And just to give you a bit of inspiration and a few ideas, think perennial basil, lavender, carob tree, rosemary, so a lot of herbs, but also like Mexican sage. There's so many bee-friendly plants. If you ever wonder and not know where to start with bee-friendly plants, we have a wonderful collection of bee-friendly plants in our knowledge base collections in Candide. And then we'd like you to please share this picture you've taken of your bee-friendly plants and use our hashtag #PollinationSA in your post, as that is the only way we're able to pick you up as a pollinator part of our campaign. And then once you've used that hashtag and you've made your post in Candide, you will receive our pollinator status, which will be a little yellow ring around your profile avatar with a little bee icon on it. And you will then also be added to our interactive map that we have inside Candide. So I'm just going to quickly share a few screens here of the app. So on the left, you'll see that is a profile that you view. So the Pollination SA badge that you see there on the left, you will see that on someone else's profile. And if you tap on that, it'll take you through to the very last, on the right screen, the hashtag pollination page with the map on. So then if people are not aware of the campaign, they can always tap into it, have a look at it. And then on your profile, in the middle screen, you'll see there's a yellow ring around the blue Candide bee, and that ring will be there for anyone that has become part of our campaign, made a post, and used the hashtag Pollination SA. Okay, without further ado, and just before I introduce Paula, we are going to do our first lucky draw. So the lucky person for the first lucky draw is going to receive, I just want to show to you all, a beautiful pair of socks, bee socks, book by Paula that is signed by her personally, and a nice selection of bee-friendly plants that you can sow in your garden now, together with a bee-friendly plant that we have selected as Candide. And the first lucky draw winner for today is Nicole Erasmus. So Nicole, if you're online, we'll get in contact with you afterwards. Well done, you are our first lucky draw for the day. Great. So now we move on to Paula. And Paula is oh, she's an incredible individual. She is so inspiring, and really it's so wonderful to just be around her and hear her talk about bees. And it's something that completely rubs off on you. Just her inspiration and her care for bees as pollinators is wonderful. And I've had the opportunity, and as Candide, we've had the opportunity as a company to work a lot with her, so we know her well. And yeah, I've asked her to join us today so that she can tell us a little bit about her own journey with bees, but also to help us touch a little bit on questions we have about bees. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Paula. I'm going to stop screen sharing now that you all can see her. And Paula, if you can just in short tell us a little bit about yourself, your story with bees, yeah, and how it all started.
Okay. Thank you so much, Shani. I'm really honoured to be part of this campaign and really excited to be talking to all your followers. So yeah, thank you very much for that. So originally I was an artist. I had a successful career as a painter, and I would travel around the world exhibiting my work. And then I fell ill just when I hit 40. So just when I was at the peak of my career, my kids were getting a little bit older, and then I fell ill, and I had 7 years bed and wheelchair bound. And it was with a genetic condition, Ehlers-Danlos, which I now feel I'm fully recovered from. So that's a miracle in itself. But while I was ill, one of the ways of coping, and this whole situation with COVID, it has brought back lots of memories of that, because I was isolated in my home. I was unable to leave the house, but for physical restraints. And so to cope with it, I had to think about what I could do rather than what I couldn't do. And I knew I couldn't paint. So I spent a lot of time daydreaming, I suppose. And something I'd always felt I wanted to do was keep bees. And so one of my birthdays while I was ill, my husband, Greg, had just said, what would you like as a present? And of course it was a bit limited. I couldn't go anywhere. I didn't need new shoes or anything. So I just said, well, I'd love a beehive, because then I could lay in bed and look out the window and watch the bees. So he bought me a beehive, and the bees came. So that's one of the stories in my book, Artist to Bees. So Nicole, I hope you enjoy reading my stories. So, and what was interesting, because I had worked so hard on recovering my own health, I'd done a lot of research about how the body works, and I started studying medical herbalism. And so when I started to be trained in beekeeping from my mentor, I questioned everything. So everything that was conventionally accepted. I mean, even smoking the bees, which is such a common thing. You know, all the images of beekeepers, they have a smoker, they're puffing away. But I realized that that would trigger a stress response in the bees. So now when I work with bees, I don't use a smoker. I actually have lavender in a water spray, and I just gently mist them. So it changed everything in how I keep bees. And I realized that at the time I was a bit of a lone voice, particularly in my beekeeping groups. And so that sort of put me on a quest really to justify what I felt intuitively was right for bees. So I attended lectures, workshops, read books, and you know, just tried to learn as much as I could about bees, and they've taken over my life.
That's wonderful. And yeah, I mean, maybe tell us a little bit more. You've been to South Africa a few times. Can you share a bit more about that for us?
Yes, yeah. Well, I was really lucky because the Newt in Somerset, which is related to Babylonstoren, that was one of my first professional jobs as a beekeeper, was to help introduce bees or manage the bees that were there. And I didn't want to do conventional beekeeping where you're buying in bees and shipping them around. So I've just worked with the wild colonies that we had originally. And so just from swarms and from splitting. So it's been a very natural expansion of the bee colonies. And so through that, I was lucky enough to go to Babylonstoren a couple of times. And so I've been really lucky to meet Gundula and Liesel. And we did some workshops, and I'm in regular contact with Arne, who looks after the bees there at Babylonstoren. And it was wonderful because it expanded my ideas of bees. And what I have found that globally, people get so used to how bees are managed and the problems of them in their own area. But when you step back and you talk to different beekeepers around the world, I mean, I have traveled all over, it's amazing how you can share the wisdom. So people get used to one practice of beekeeping and tend not to think of a different way. So things, for instance, in Oman, they just puff herbs around their beehives, and they use the herbs as a medicinal a treatment against varroa. So instead of using chemicals, they just puff medicinal herbs. So things like that you can then share around the world. And I think as a global community, as beekeepers, there is a movement towards more natural beekeeping and preserving our pollinators.
Wonderful. And Paula, talking about, the global movement towards preserving bees and taking care of them, I think we can all agree that there are lots of opinions at the moment out there of where the bee population is at the moment. And I just thought I wanted to ask you, what are you experiencing and witnessing at the moment?
Okay. Well, I've always been on a quest. I'm very interested in the spiritual connection with bees as well. So I've been on a bit of a quest to find where the bees are happy and where they're healthy. And you'll be pleased to know that at Babylonstoren, they were both. And they produce a lot of propolis. And propolis is a natural antibacterial, antimicrobial product that the bees produce from the resin of trees to protect their hives. Now, people, you're all hearing about save the bees, let's save the bees, and I think everybody pictures a honeybee, but in actual fact there's over 22,000 species of bees around the world, and it's the non-honeybees that have been really, really damaged with human behavior over the last 100 years. So through loss of habitat from intensive farming, for instance, just the spraying of crops, when that was introduced, it would be timed to the benefit of honeybees, who tend to get up a bit later. And so the spraying would be done early in the mornings, and the fungicides, which go deep into the soil. Well, a lot of the solitary bees and the bumblebees that are natives, I mean, in South Africa, you have over 3,000 of them. They're just drenched with chemicals and they die. And because we're not taking honey from them, we tend not to notice. Whereas with honeybee colonies, because we have an interest in their survival through the honey, we notice that actually their numbers have maintained the same. If we lose honeybee colonies, we can replace them quite easily. Whether you agree with the way that they do it or not, with shipping in queens from around the world, but they can be replaced. So we're in a situation at the moment where certain regions in the world have lost all their native pollinators, and the habitat for growing our crops is so hostile to native pollinators that we are now dependent on honeybees being shipped in boxes to actually pollinate our crops. So the almond crops in California is a prime example of this, where the native pollinators just can't survive that environment, and the monocrops are so vast that bees need food throughout the year, so they cannot survive in an environment where there's only blossom for 3 weeks. And also the toxic overload of the chemicals that are needed to produce a crop on that scale just kills the bees.
Thank you for sharing, Paula. I think, it's really one of those topics that you read about, but you're not always 100% sure about. And just to expand a little bit more on that, and on what you discussed, are there like any specific things that worries you at the moment? And complete opposite to that, are there any things that makes you feel encouraged?
Okay. I suppose the thing that worries me is the general knowledge that people have on a global scale of bees and pollinators, and this lack of awareness of the connectiveness of all things. So I have an interest in bees, so that's developed now into an interest in pollinators, and then honey. And the plants, you know, through my own recovery, I'm very interested in the medicinal properties of plants. And I see that bees are that connection. So they take the goodness from the plants through the nectar and pollen. So the pollen they collect from plants is the protein that the bees need to feed their brood to grow. And then the nectar is what they use for their carbohydrate, but they can also transform the nectar into this magical honey. And so it's getting people to understand, or helping people to understand, the real value of this. So it's not this simple case that we're living on this planet detached from everything, and if the bees die, we then have to have robotic bees to pollinate our plants. I really feel strongly that the bees are our canaries. So they're an indicator species. As they die, everything else dies, and we die soon after. And just to give you an idea of the value of honey, I have this little necklace here, which has a life's work of one bee. So this is how much honey one bee will produce in its lifetime. So it's a 1/12 of a teaspoon. And so if we understand the value of honey, we can then start appreciating what it takes to feed the bees. So for them to produce this, they need food to feed on. So what I'm trying to do is raise that awareness. And instead of us feeling overwhelmed and helpless, you know, the globe is in a terrible state, and what difference will I make? But actually we can make so much difference where we spend our money. Every penny, every rand we spend has an impact, has an influence, and has a consequence. So if you just want to do one thing to save the bees, just be conscious of where you buy your food from. So, you know, if your food is drenched in chemicals, then it's killing bees to produce that food. And I know there's always this argument about, well, I can't afford organic food, but can we afford to be sick? Can we afford to live in a toxic environment? And can we afford to live without bees? And so you have to start weighing up, you know, what is the cost of life?
It's incredible to look at that necklace you shared with us, and to think that is the life's work of such a tiny insect, you know, and an insect which we are so scared of with times, you know, growing up and thinking they're going to sting you and you have to keep away from them. I think, you know, Paula, through this journey that you've had with bees, and really sharing this knowledge with people, and trying to encourage people to really become more aware and understand bees and what they need in their situation more. Have you seen, like, you know, have you seen your, like, influence on other people? Have you seen any positive you know, encounters with people around that? So where you have spoken to people maybe 2 years ago, if you look now, you know, fast forward a little bit, have you seen any positive change?
Oh, yes, I feel so blessed, because I'm obviously very passionate, and I can perhaps be a bit clear cut or black and white about, well, if you want to save the bees, just do this, just do that. And what I find amazing is, by sharing the stories of the bees around the world, and wherever I go, I have different stories that I can share. And then I have people come back and go, oh my goodness, I've never seen it like this. I've never thought of it like that. And I felt so honored, because Ernst, who's at Babylonstoren, who is an amazing biologist, and when I was at Babylonstoren, I just so wanted to sit and have a meal with him and pick his brains and talk to him. And I didn't have the time, you know, I was busy running workshops and working there, and he was working too. Well, then he visited the Newt last summer, and I thought he wouldn't remember me. And he came up and he said, oh, Paula, he said, I attended your workshop, and he said, it changed my life. He said, it just gave him a whole new perspective on bees. And that is, you know, I feel, oh, my work is done. You know, if every single person who can just change one thing, or see it slightly differently, or just start to think, well, do I want to buy that jar of honey that is cheaper than water, or do I want to have this special honey that I know where it's come from, I know the bees are cared for? That makes a huge difference. And, you know, and planting, if you choose, when you're buying a plant, if you choose a plant that may or may not be treated with chemicals, or a plant that you know is a really good ingredient for your garden. And you know, it's got to that stage where I feel now every choice I make, it has a bee impact. And so it's made me less, I suppose, less detached from nature. I really do feel the connectivity of all things and the impact that just my life has. So if I do travel to South Africa, and when I do, and I love traveling, I am somebody described me as a bee adventurer, because I love to learn, and I love how communities are working with bees in different ways around the world, and their stories need to be shared. And but I feel if I'm going to be making that carbon footprint of traveling, then I have to offset it. It has to be for a worthwhile cause.
I'm actually getting goosebumps as you explained your encounter with Ernst and how he said you changed his life, because I can very clearly remember 2 years ago I had the privilege of attending one of Paula's honey tastings at Babylonstoren, and it was for me as well. It was life changing, and since then I've never looked at the price of a jar of local honey. I just took it from the shelf. I knew it was local. I looked at the label and I bought it, and I never thought twice of it. And you changed my life about that.
Oh,
So thank you for that. But on the topic of honey, and we've touched a little bit on it in some of your questions now already, but you, as I know, you are a honey collector, and a lot of us are familiar with this wonderful golden liquid that we so easily, you know, put on our granola or eat on our toast. Please share a little bit more with us on honey and just some additional knowledge on it.
Well, before I started studying it in Italy, I thought all honey tasted the same because I tended to only eat local honey, and I just thought honey was honey. And in the honey sensory analysis course, you have to learn to identify 18 different varieties, and most of them are Mediterranean Italian honeys, but they're single variety honeys. So they're a honey that's just made from one plant. And in the UK, because we're all cramped up and tiny, it's very difficult for our bees to produce a single variety of honey. You know, in our gardens, we have hundreds of different things. Even in our fields, there's mixtures of stuff. Whereas because honey has been appreciated more, perhaps in the Mediterranean, there has been a culture of developing thyme honey, rosemary honey, eucalyptus honey, lime blossom, chestnut. There's just so many varieties of honey, and they are all different, and they are this amazing well, they've captured the story of the plants, and they've transformed that plant into this liquid gold. So I find honey now has become an addictive passion for me. So wherever I go, I'm wanting to try the honey, and I have got some jars from South Africa, and one in particular is buku. And what I did do, which might have been a bit naughty, but I did have some dried buku leaves. And when I do honey workshops here, I pass around the honey for people to taste. And I've got this little pot with the buku leaves, and I just say, right, now sniff the leaves and now taste the honey. And something I learned from Babylonstoren was the first time I visited, I had to use South African honeys. And so some of them I hadn't tasted before. And there was a white nut, macadamia nut, which we don't have here. And when I'd asked the honey producer, what does it taste like? You know, how can I identify it? And he said, oh, it tastes like macadamia nuts. Well, I'd only ever had macadamia nuts in Hawaii. And I tasted this honey and I thought it doesn't remind me of Hawaii or macadamia nuts at all. But when I returned to Babylonstoren, the macadamia nut tree was in blossom with these beautiful purple blooms. And I smelt those blossoms, and then I could connect the honey. And so this is what I'm learning, is quite often the honey captures the blossom, which makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, that's what it's made from. So this is what's so incredible about traveling and about sharing the stories, is that, you know, that macadamia nut honey can travel all around the world, but it's captured that bit of blossom from South Africa. And so that's magic, the magic of honey.
Oh, honey is truly, it's wonderful. And if you're talking about the flowering macadamia nut tree, anyone in South Africa who's been to Babylonstoren during the time, that is one of the most incredible trees to see in flower in your life ever. It's just absolutely stunning. Paula, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and truly your passion with us. It's an honor to be able to share this journey with you and to have you share your heart with us and your passion about bees. And I really want to thank you for being with us today. And before we move on to Gundula, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone. We've noticed a lot of questions coming through, especially about beekeepers. So I think just before we move on, I think we have in Candide a very extensive list of beekeepers that people can get in contact with in South Africa. And there are a number of them active on Candide. So I think for me, just quickly, a first port of call would be have a look on Candide. You'll be able to connect there with some of our local beekeepers. And then we have time now quickly for our second spot prize before we go into our next discussion with Gundula. And the winner of our next hamper is Nicola Meyer. Nicola, if you are online, you are our next lucky winner of a pair of socks, bee-friendly seeds that you can sew, and a book from Paula signed by her personally. Without further ado, I'm going to move over to screen share again. We are moving now to Gundula Deutschlander. And she is a master gardener at Babylonstoren. For those of you not familiar with Babylonstoren, it's an incredible wine farm just outside Stellenbosch. And it's got a 3.5 hectare edible garden that is absolutely, absolutely incredible and filled with the most incredible plants. And at Babylonstoren, Gundula is truly, for me, the queen of stories. You feel like you're in a wonderland when you walk with her through the garden and she shares her stories about plants. It's really incredibly moving to be with her in that specific garden. And other than sharing her stories, she's also responsible for the healing garden at Babylonstoren, which is quite a new addition to the garden and a beautiful space with a lot of interesting plants, all with healing or medicinal properties to them. So Gundula, thank you for being on the call with us as well, and for being with us here today. And as we've mentioned at the beginning, at Candide, the heart of Candide is truly gardens and getting people out into gardens and you know, making them more aware of plants and bee-friendly plants specifically. And I think if we can take a step back and you know, almost like if I could ask you if you could design the ideal garden for a bee, what would that look like?
Hello. Yes. Well, I really think being in Africa, we need a beautiful tree that provides shade and a tree with flowers. So I've chosen my home to be under wild olive trees, which I'm sitting under now. And they are incredible attractions to all kinds of pollinators, including different bees. They're now in fruit, so the birds come for the berries, and it's just my favorite tree. But lower down in the valley, I have a sweet thorn that when it blooms has a scent that just melts through the air. And that scent really is, for me, the scent of home. And it's the scent of Africa. And so I think it's two really impressive trees that's pretty adaptable right throughout Southern Africa for people to consider. Next in my garden, I want to feel protected. And so I like to create hedges that surround the space. And I think a really good way to try and find hedges that attract insects and bees in your area is when you walk out in the mornings. Just when the sun is about to come up, you really hear a buzz, a strong buzz of the shrubs that attract a lot of bees. It might be a buddleia. Here we've got some cercia that flowers a lot, and it's those kind of shrubs that are really attractive. In terms of bushes and perennial shrubs, I think it's useful to choose actually a few of the same and group them together, because bees like to make a bee line to where they can really easily collect their nectar and their pollen. And there are many different options. Yeah, plenty.
I think I can jump in there and say if anyone is unsure of bee-friendly plants, as I mentioned before, we have a wonderful collection in Candide of bee-friendly plants that we've put together for everyone to help them with specific plants. And I think, Gundula, you know, talking about plants specifically, you've mentioned, you know, hedges and trees and shrubs. Do you have, what's your top 3 bee-friendly plants that you would advise us to plant in our gardens?
I think it's site specific. So we're speaking to the whole of South Africa, and I think it varies. It is really good to consider our wild and our solitary bees. And so I live in a fynbos area. I've got these suikerbosses right here next to me, and the buzz coming off them is remarkable. They're just a cup full of nectar. And again, when I went to pick these, they're just growing around me. A wide range of different kinds of bees actually popping in there. And that's what you want if you're really looking at what's local. But it's not that easy for somebody to necessarily plant a protea. So I think one of the shrubs that are very attractive in the Cape is hypoestus, which we call the ribbon bush. They're just actually shimmering with the excitement that goes around them, and they flower for a very long period. Otherwise, aloes are adaptable, fagies. But I think, again, useful to use Candide, which in the knowledge section just shows a huge range of different plants that are available and that will be more suitable to your specific area.
I had, you spoke about hypoestus now. I've got a garden bed filled with hypoestus, and it was in complete flower about a month ago, and it was truly, as you said, a shimmer and a buzz of just bees for an entire month. It was so beautiful to see. So Gundula, I'm lucky to have a garden. You're lucky to have an outdoor space close to fynbos. We're both very lucky to have such spaces. But what about people in a scenario where they don't have a garden and they don't have the luxury of space? I mean, is there anything that they can specifically plant in a pot that can encourage a bee-friendly environment?
Yeah. Well, I brought my kumquat over here, which flowers for me twice a year, and it is so attractive. And if you really have a small space, you want to choose plants that give you, as well as giving the bees. And so having a tree that produces fruit, and I think all citrus do well in pots, but a kumquat's quite a nice, smallish one. That's very useful. Another thing that provides shade and maybe protection for the stoop is a climber, Grenadella, that will climb up and provide both the fruit as well as these glorious flowers that attract bees. For smaller pots, herbs, something like perennial basil is endless. It never stops flowering where I live, and they're just graced with insects all the time. Also have here a pot of balbean. You can you do it? It's just the most easiest plant to grow, to share with others, and it's so handy because these leaves have that wonderful gooey substance that if you ever do get stung, just really takes away all the agony and pain. Easiest plant to have. So I think those are really useful plants. And rosemary. I never go anywhere without rosemary.
I have to agree. Rosemary is an absolute winner. And I think our number one, and I have it in my garden and it's still buzzing with bees, number one plant at Candide is really perennial basil. It's incredible to see bees buzz around perennial basil and how they enjoy those flowers. So Gundula, we've painted a beautiful picture about plants and our gardens, you know, and really what we can do as gardeners to plant for bees and to ensure that we have enough food for them. But over and above plants itself, is there anything else we can do that can create this kind of ideal habitat for bees in our gardens?
Yeah, because our bees don't hibernate much in South Africa, it's really valuable to have variety throughout the year, but most important is not to spray any pesticide. And I think people often wish to feel safe by spraying organic insecticides. I make my own organic insecticide with garlic and chilies as a spray, but even that the point is of an insecticide that is its skills. And so you really don't want to cause any damage to bees and the beneficial insects, ladybirds included. And so it's really wise to observe your insects. And if you want to spray, if you really feel the need to, that you spray really late in the evening when you know the bees are already gone off to their hive. And by the time they're out in the morning again, those chemicals have dissipated and disappeared. And so you don't leave any residue. But it's really important to take great caution when you spray anything. And then nice thing to have is water. I live in a very dry area, so just a bowl of water with maybe a stone in it so that the bees can climb out if they tumble into the water itself is a wonderful space to watch the bees coming in to drink and going back home again.
Another thing I've actually read to add to your list is also diversity. I think, you know, I've read about flowers specifically and how, you know, different shaped flowers attracts different kind of bees, and how important it is to have a variety of different flowers. So not to only have just, you know, a single layered flower like a poppy, for instance, but have something a bit more intricate like Wilde Dacha, Leonidas leonoris, or have, like you said, you know, the protea that you have behind you, which is a bit more of an intricate flower.
Mm. I picked some of the sage. So all sages have that lip-like flower, and the bees love going in there. I mean, even I know one of our participants is called Melissa, which is Greek for bee, and that has that similar lip-like flower, which is wonderful. And Shani, a really important thing I think we tend to forget is weeds. So I've picked some of my Cape sorrel, the syrinx that are busy flowering at the moment. Our weeds are valuable food sources. So don't despair if you're a gardener. You've got weeds growing in some areas of your garden or all over. It doesn't matter. They're there to remedy the land, and they're there to provide really essential pollen and nectar to our native bees.
That is such a wonderful tip. Thank you for sharing, Gundula. So next time you want to go out weeding, think twice and let your weeds flower. I think my advice would be just cut off the dry flower heads before they go into seed. Otherwise, yeah, 7 years of weeding might be on you. But yeah, keep the flowers for as long as you possibly can, because it's valuable food for bees. Gundula, thank you very much for sharing some of your insights about plants and really what we can do in our gardens to ensure that we plant for bees and to ensure that there's always food and water in our outdoor spaces. Great. So we have come to almost the end, but luckily we have some time left still for a few questions. So we had a look at, I've got some amazing worker bees sitting next to me, helping me do all the hard work while I'll do all the talking. And we've got a list of questions together. So I am going to first start with Gundula, since we were just talking to Gundula. And I've got 3 questions here for Gundula. So the first question comes from, excuse my pronunciation if it's not right, but it comes from Samantha Bright White, I think. She says, Gundula, I want bees for my new large outdoor vegetable garden with fruit trees. Where do I start? Gundula, you just have to unmute yourself quickly.
Thank you. Samantha, hello. I think a little bit of protection is always valuable. And I always plant on my boundary within the hedge and choose the hedge that works for you. I don't know where in South Africa is situated, but I like to have around the edge Wilde Als, which is Artemisia afra. And I find it one of the most important medicinal herbs we have in Southern Africa, grows just about everywhere. And when they bloom, it is remarkable to see how the bees are attracted to that. But I find it also a very useful plant to be deterrent for unwanted pests in general, and then attracting the beneficial insects. And so what I like to do is see which kind of herbs I can plant amongst my fruit trees. And if you can find comfrey anywhere, that's one that's quite easy to plant, dotted around fruit trees themselves. And then incorporate between your sections as many perennial herbs as you can. So these perennial herbs also have the propolis in their barks that the bees can collect for them to make their own space protected, and will also protect your whole vegetable garden. So it's that finding that balance between the annual crops that will provide you the vegetables and the herbs that provide you the protection and the safety for your special garden space.
Thank you, Gundula. Now we are going to head over to Paula. Paula, I've got a question from Zolisi Nkomo. He would like to know, or she, how active are bees as pollinators in the South African winter, particularly in the Midlands area? I'm not sure if you'll be able to give such detailed answer about the area, but let's see.
Okay. Well, as I'm not sure if I think it was Gundula who mentioned earlier that your bees don't go into hibernation. In the UK, our bees go into a state of torpor. So throughout the winter months, they're not pollinating anything. And I think really this is where agriculture and beekeeping and gardening is all interacted, because even if you're growing crops, you need to think about what you've got flowering throughout the year. So I can't say what's flowering at the moment in the Midlands area or in between crops, but that's what you need to be thinking of, is that the bees need flowers. That's where the nectar and pollen is. And so you need things flowering throughout the year. And if you look at nature and weeds, they tend to try and cover for that. And something that I've noticed, particularly in the UK, is that we might be bringing in all sorts of exotic plants. So for instance, the botanic gardens in Wales, they have honeybees, and they wanted to see which plants the honeybees were going to. And they had 8,000 species of plants in their gardens. But what was interesting was when they analysed the honey, they found that the bees chose 11 species, and they were all the native species. So despite having this amazing exotic platter, they went for the brambles, they went for the dandelions, all the native trees. And so this is the connection of the soil and the land and the temperature. So it's no good just thinking, oh, we need this thing that will flower at this time of year, because it may be flowering, but it may not have the right conditions to produce the nectar that you need. So it's really important that you speak with a specialist who understands the soil in your area, who understands the climate. And of course, climates are changing. So it's looking at the whole picture rather than just saying, just plant this, because it may not be right for your soil. It may not be right for, as a companion crop. You don't want things all flowering at once. You want them to spread throughout the year.
Thank you, Paula. I'm going to give you another question, because I also want to hear a little bit more about this. So Andrea Ferguson, she says, did I hear correctly? The lifetime production of honey from one bee is a 1/12 of a teaspoon?
Yes, that is absolutely correct. And when I was visiting a big bee exhibition event in a conference in Canada last year, and this lady came up and chatted to me, and she just sort of was fiddling with this necklace. And when I saw it, she saw me looking at it, and I realized what it meant, and she realized I knew what it meant, and we both cried, because we just were, oh, this is all that a bee produces. So I then had to, leave where I was. I was exhibiting a poster about bees in Bhutan, and then I had to run down and I bought the last necklace, because it's just a constant reminder of how precious honey is.
It's actually, it's mind-boggling to think it's so little.
Sorry.
No, go for it.
I did see a question which was sort of about activism and signing petitions. Do you mind if I comment on that?
Please go for it.
I once saw a film which was about some indigenous people in Mexico who predicted the downfall of Western society, and it was quite terrifying, really, and it's all playing out. And he said at the end that people feel helpless and they sign petitions and they lobby governments. But what we forget is there's only 300 governments in the world, but there's 7 billion people. And so we really do have the power to change. And what I've found as I get older and perhaps wiser is that you can have more impact changing the people around you and changing your own behavior. Just for instance, standing in a garden centre queue and asking if this peppermint plant has got any chemicals in it, and somebody has to go off and ask and come back, and when they say, oh, actually, yes, it does, you go, well, I won't have it. Everybody else who you've held up is then questioning, why would you not buy a plant that's got chemicals in? Or more to the point, oh my gosh, how come a simple plant like that has got chemicals in it? So you change the world by your behavior, and there are 7 billion of us. So if together we act, if you can get 100,000 pollinators, that's far larger an impact than 300 governments. So, you know, let's think of people power and changing, being the change we want to see.
It is very true. Like, I think if we can all just, you know, become more aware and make one small change, we can surely, you know, together, hopefully have a bigger, more positive change. Paula, I'm going to quickly move over to Gundula just before we're almost going to hit time. And what we decided to do is I'm going to ask Gundula one more question quickly, and then we're going to do our grand prize giveaway. And then if some of you would like to leave, you're more than welcome to. We know we've only booked out an hour of time, but we are going to stay on a little bit longer to answer some of these questions. So for those that want to linger a little bit longer, we are going to be here. We're not going to leave right now. So just one question quickly for Gundula. So Gundula, do bees just, Samantha wants to know, do bees just like plain water in a bowl or with some sugar added?
Hello, Samantha. I think plain water is best because bees will go for sugar. As we all know, that sugar is not necessarily that good for you. I asked Paula the other day also about, you know, honey or sugar. So Paula says sugar is better than giving honey to bees because you never know what pathogens are in it. However, I really think ordinary, plain tap water, untreated, is really the best. That's what they would be looking for. They'd be looking for a stream or any kind of puddle from which they can drink. And that's what they need.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gundula. I think, yes, as Gundula mentioned earlier as well, I think the most important thing for a water source in your garden is always remember, you know, a bee needs to sit somewhere to be able to drink the water. So make sure there's an area inside the water where they can land on to be able to get to the water. I think that's the most important things. And that will also be beneficial for birds to be able to go and sit and then sip the water out of the water bath. Okay, so we're quickly going to do our last lucky draw. Tessa did the last lucky draw for me. And the winner of our grand prize today, so I haven't really mentioned the grand prize yet. The grand prize is everything else that the 2 previous lucky draw winners won. So it's the book from Paula and the socks and the seeds. And then on top of that, what we are adding is we're adding a Babylonstoren gift voucher for when they open again one day, hopefully soon, to one of their workshops of your choice that you can go and attend. And my advice would be look out for one of the bee workshops. They're really incredible. And Babylon, yeah, Arnay and Liesel is doing an incredible job there. So yeah, you're going to win. You're going to be the lucky winner of that voucher and the book and the socks and the seeds and some plants. And our lucky winner for today is Gerdia Liebenberg. If you are online, well done. And thanks for joining us for this session. So I think from my side, before we move on to more questions, I really just want to say thank you to every single person attending our session today and joining in to listen about bees and plants and Candide, but more specifically to listen about Pollination SA and why we are starting this movement tomorrow on World Bee Day. It's truly the number one reason for starting this movement is to make people more aware of bees by encouraging them to plant food for bees. That is our number one priority. So yeah, for those of you leaving, thank you. Please share the word, spread the buzz, and help us to get to our 100,000 mark for pollinators in the next 10 months. Thank you very much for joining. Great. So Paula and Gundula, a few more questions. I am going to jump to a question for Gundula. And for Paula, sorry. Paula, Dion Knutzer would like to know which global north practices which haven't taken hold here in South Africa or in the South should we avoid at all costs, and why?
Okay. Hello, Dion. Thank you for your question. I think the most important one is the chemical treatments inside hives, which again, most people are completely oblivious to the fact that this happens. And I was lucky enough to be speaking at a conference in the UK just before lockdown, and I was sandwiched between two scientists. And forgive me, I'm sat out in my garden and there seems to be a helicopter and a plane doing tricks all around me. So I hope you can still hear me. But yes, I've always said, just don't put chemicals inside a hive. They're wild animals. Why would you want to do that? And I know that there's these threats of disease, but my own health recovery was through natural treatments, and all bodies want to heal themselves. They want to be in a fit state. And what we are doing by drenching bees with chemicals is we are severely affecting their immune system, so they can't defend themselves against pathogens and about viruses and from viruses. And what was lovely was the scientists who spoke after me at this conference had said, yeah, science has now proved that the bees survive better when they're left to their own devices. Now, the problem is that if people stop using chemicals straight away, their bees will die. And so they're saying, well, just phase it out. Now, I'm saying, do we really want to maintain colonies that are not healthy? So this is a bit, an interesting conversation or a debate. But also it's that transporting of bees. I think we should only be using our native species, even of honeybees. So if you want to keep bees, don't buy them in, don't ship them in, just bait a hive. And I do write a lot about where to position a hive and things. And with your Apis capensis or Mellifera capensis, the Cape honeybee is very migratory and it does fly around. And if they want to be with you, they'll move in. And if they don't like where they are, they'll move out again. And I think that's a way to be working with nature, is actually listening to them rather than capturing them and clipping their wings and preventing them from moving on. So it's being a bit more in tune with nature. And that's what we really need to be doing.
Thank you, Paula. Something I just wanted to mention that I didn't mention earlier, and I should have. We're obviously not going to get to all the questions today, and there's a long list of great questions that came through. What we'd like to encourage people to do is please, both Paula and Gundula are on Candide. They have registered profiles there. They're active in Candide. It would be wonderful if you can ask your questions to them in Candide, where they can answer them for you. Or if you want, we've supplied our email address in the presentation, but I'll quickly just repeat it again. You're more than welcome to email us directly, and we'll make sure that we get an answer for you from Paula or Gundula. So the email address is hello@candide.co.za. hello@candide.co.za. You're more than welcome to send them through for us. Paula, and Gundula, moving on to you. Christy Payne wants to know, is there anyone or any company that supplies winter flowering seeds or plants specifically helpful for bees?
Yeah, for sure. I think there are many companies or many seeds also that you can find even in the local supermarket. You will not know once you've opened the packet to see if they've been treated chemically or not, but a lot of our wildflower seeds do not have chemicals on them. It's more the vegetable seeds and the peas and things like that that do have are chemically treated. So don't sow anything, obviously, chemically treated. But I think the easiest plants to grow at the moment are annual, winter flowering annuals are your bokbaai vygies. So any vygie that you can find, it would be really wonderful. And then the others generally tend to be foreign things. So it'll be your gousblomme or calendulas, nigellas. Linseed is exquisite, and you can actually sow that right throughout the year. Yeah, sunflowers even you can still sow if you don't have too much cold where you are. But there's a wide range. And again, go to Candide, have a look at their knowledge section. They'll give you nice lists of annuals that you can really focus for winter planting.
Thank you, Gundula, for answering that. Yes, on Candide, you can definitely find suppliers. And I think in South Africa, we are all very happy that nurseries opened last week. So there are also a number of nurseries, I've been to a few already, that are stocked up with seeds to sow. So you definitely have a look at your local nursery as well. Gundula, another question for you. Marguerite would like to know, McRobert, will you also touch on companion planting of bee-friendly plants for vegetable and fruit gardens, please?
Yeah, I think it's really valuable because a lot of the herbs that you will sow for companion planting are typically lead to flowers. I mean, even your fennels and your parsleys that you can grow between your cabbages, which tend to guess a lot of pests, or that cabbage family. So if you sow the herbs that have a strong scent between those, these eventually you can just leave to flower, and in that process they will provide really valuable nectar and pollen to the insects. Oh, one other plant that I think is really valuable and good for sowing in winter is the alfalfa, which bees adore. You can just crop it for yourself to throw in your smoothies for the green leaves, or you can leave it to sow again. But it is something that is really beneficial in improving your soil health. So a lot of the green manures that you can sow now at the moment, your lupins included and Serendella, all those kind of things will improve the soil, will allow for better harvest when summertime comes, and can be great for companion planting.
Great, thank you, Gundula. Paula, moving on to you. We have an anonymous question that came through that says, my dad used to say that bees get angry when they cannot work and their hives are full. Is this true?
Bees can get angry for all kinds of reasons. And I do talk in depth, and I have written about this, and it's about frequency and vibration and moods and reflecting. And again, it's their spiritual connection with us as humans. So quite often bees do reflect the environment that they're around, and they are generally about creating a neutral atmosphere. So bees are very present, and what they are doing all the time is thinking about what needs to be done now, without judgment, without thinking of the future, without thinking of the past. And so if anybody approaches their space with a different frequency, then the bees will bring you back into their space, their time. So bees can get angry if sometimes I can go to a hive and I can open them up and they'll be absolutely fine and calm. And other times they could be angry, and we don't know what's going on inside. If they're trying to re-queen, if they've just lost a queen, if they're really busy collecting nectar and processing honey, and they need to do a lot of work to process the nectar into honey, because they have to evaporate it from 80% water to 20%. And if you open up the hive, you're affecting the whole temperature, and it can take 10 days for the colony to re-establish its temperature balance. So but I do like to think, and I do observe with my bee team and myself, that more often than not, if you're stung, it is your own fault. And there are many practitioners around the world who use apitherapy, and if you connect the place that you were stung with the meridian in your body, and then relate that to what that meridian is with Chinese medicine, quite often you can find that they are trying to to sort you out, remind you of what you need healing. So if you think of bees are here to heal us, they're here to heal the earth, to make medicine from the plants. Even in the Quran, it says, you know, that from their bellies emerges this fluid that is medicine for those who reflect. So I think we need to change our perspective and go back into the bees' perspective. They have a really important job to do and they want to get on with it. And every time we open up the hive or go into their space, we're in their way. And, you know, my hair is the wrong hair for a beekeeper, because if I'm in their way, they get caught up and they can't get out. So I'm going to be stung. So it's my fault. So they're not necessarily angry. They're just frustrated. But lavender calms them down. And that has been proven now with science that, and they do go to certain flowers to balance the medicinal aroma inside their hive. So bees through our winter, they will actually eat different honeys. They don't just start at the left-hand side and work across. They'll move around because they want a varied diet. So yeah, we can learn a lot from the bees.
Thank you, Paula. Another one for you, touching back on the topic of honey. Natasha Lyon wants to know, Leon, is it true that dark amber honeys have higher medicinal properties than lighter honeys, and that multi-foraging honey is also higher in health than single foraging honey?
Yes and no. As a guideline, people would think that darker honeys are more medicinal because the Manuka honey is really dark and that's well known to have high medicinal properties. Saying that, you can have some also really medicinal honeys like arbutus honey, which can be very pale. When it crystallizes, it will go quite pale. And then Niuli honey, which is from Madagascar, that can be quite pale as it crystallizes. The other thing is that quite often dark honeys are not from the nectar of plants, but from the secretions of aphids. So that's a honeydew honey. So, and then, of course, because that's come from trees, that has a different medicinal property. So it goes back to what Gundula says, that it'll be having the resins of the trees and be more propolis. And sometimes the honeys can be affected by how old the wax comb is. So if there's more propolis in the wax comb, then that will be reflected in the honey. I believe that all honeys are medicinal. And just like all herbs and plants are medicinal, or all herbs are medicinal, they have a different role. So one person's medicine may be another person's poison. So see what you're drawn to, just like what plants you're drawn to and what weeds you're drawn to. And, you know, the last 10 years since I've been keeping bees, I've been letting my garden go more wild and seeing what appears, and the medicine comes. And you might see I've got some wonderful cow parsley, which is a well-known hedge weed, and it's come up on the edge of my lawn and I love it. So that's here, as Gundula was saying, to heal the soil. These weeds are here to heal the soil. And so it all depends where the plant is. And with Manuka honey that's been tested from some of the most amazing places in New Zealand where people are very spiritual and they treat their soil, that Manuka honey is really, really very powerful. But could you really compare that to a monoculture where people have thought, Manuka honey is worth a lot of money, and then they strip the land and they plant rows and rows of Manuka to make the honey? Is that going to have the same vibrational healing properties? I think not. So, yeah. So it all depends. There's no straight answer for that.
Thanks, Paula. And then I think a last one for Paula, before I move over to Gundula for a last question. Vicky Sleet is asking, or she's saying, they keep finding dead bees at a particular spot at home every morning. Is there a reason for this?
Okay. Yeah, dead bees are often a concern. However, bees die all the time. They only live for between 4 and 6 weeks, so they are going to die. And bees are very clean and they don't like to keep the dead bodies inside their hive. So if you don't have a hive there, I wouldn't be surprised if you've got a wild colony somewhere nearby and they're just carrying out the dead bodies and dropping them in the corner in your garden. So that could be it. Or it could be more sinister, where you have some chemicals nearby or a treated plant and the bees are feeding off that plant and then dropping dead. So without seeing the bees or knowing your environment, it'd be difficult to say. But I recently had a pile of dead bees, and I know that it was from a crop spraying that bees had gone to, and then the hive don't want them back in the hive, so they're kicked out, and that's very upsetting.
Thanks, Paula. I don't know, it's very interesting. Just this afternoon, I made toast with something sweet on top of it. And I had a bee fly into the kitchen, literally coming to sit on top of my toast. My perennial basil is just next to the kitchen back door. So it just shows you also how quickly they can enter your house, as they are attracted, obviously, to the sweet smell. Gundula, last question for you. We touched earlier on seeds and you know, where we can find seeds at the moment, and you mentioned it's important to you know, to buy good heirloom seeds that are not treated. We got a question that asks, is it possible to see in a seed whether it's treated or not?
Usually when I see treated seeds, I see that they're a different color. But that's the only way that I can see. And so I cannot really tell you exactly, but that's the most common way. I don't know, Paula, have you seen it differently? So actually, the answer is better to really get your supplies from a company that you know is treating their things organically and not treating their seeds at all. So I think somebody also mentioned there are only 2 companies in South Africa that do sell untreated seed, and that's why it is so wonderful to leave your own plants to actually set seed themselves. It's already adapted to your own environment, and it is really easy. It just takes them a longer period, but you know that the lifespan is just so much more beneficial for that.
On that topic of harvesting your own seeds, because I think that is something really important and something we can make more people aware of. It's for instance something I've never done in my garden, and I started doing it about a year or 2 ago, is harvesting my own seeds from poppies or lace flowers or even herbs and vegetable. How do you store those seeds? If you've now harvested them and you know they're good quality, how do you keep them so that they don't, you know, go off, for instance?
So it's really important that you allow your seeds to ripen 100% on the plant in your garden. Once it's ripened, you cut them and put them into a paper bag, and to allow them to really make sure that they are completely dry. So pick them on dry days, dry them carefully, not in the sun, but in a space where it has enough airflow to dry carefully. And then if you suspect you might get little bugs and weevils, it's good to clean your seed once they're dried, so that there's not, like particularly in pea pods when you can't see bugs inside, that you really do clean them. And I suggest to bottle them up if you suspect anything. I sometimes add a little bit of cinnamon just to make sure that it's really cleaner in that way, it doesn't get fungus. But you can, if you don't have space for lots of bottles, you can put them into paper envelopes. Always make sure you put the name on and the date, because some seeds will become old and will not germinate again, particularly the umbelliferous plants, your carrot families. Those seeds do not last very long. But that's the basics. If you're worried again that your envelopes might get attacked by insects in your dark cupboard later, pack a few envelopes in a little glass jar or plastic container.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gundula. Yeah, I think just from my side, again, just would like to thank everyone for joining today, and really for the great questions we could answer now and the interaction we could have. I think all of them were interesting and things we all wanted to know and were interested in. And really for Paula and Gundula, once again, my deepest thanks to both of you for being part of our webinar today and really sharing in our journey of Pollination SA and making sure we spread the word and helping us, you know, educate people and making them more aware of bees and showing them how easy it is that that every single one of us can make a change with just a small change, or small step towards the right change. And for any other queries from anyone or any more questions, please feel free to email us, as I mentioned before, hello@candide.co.za, or please get in contact with us on Candide. You can tag me if you want, or more specifically, you can tag our Candide ZA profile on Candide. That's our profile through which we interact with our community, and we'll help to direct you in the right direction. Or, as I mentioned, Gundula and Paula are both on Candide, and you'll be able to tag both of them as well in your questions, or direct a question to them. And then last but not least, pollination. We did now have the launch webinar today, but the functionality I explained earlier about the pollinator status that you'll receive in Candide, that functionality is only going live in Candide tomorrow on World Bee Day. So if you make a post tomorrow, you will receive your pollinator status. If you've already made a post, don't worry. We will make sure that all the early excited post makers will also get their post in Candide marked as pollinators. So yes, I think from my side, thank you very much to everyone joining our call today, and really for everyone also helping me with the call. It's a wonderful movement to be part of, and it's going to be you know, a 10-month movement. So it's not something short-lived. I think keep your eyes on us. We're going to be launching really exciting things throughout the next 10 months to just build on this awareness and this knowledge we want to share as Candide. Great. Thanks, Gundula. Thanks, Paula.
Thank you.